This week I'm going to be reading the oldest book and the newest book on my TBR based off the year it was published. Hey, there's a problem. We just got transported to the 1800s. Actual heck did I just read? While I'm a big advocate of library books, I'm also a little bit grossed out by this one. This book was 95% sad. Hi friends and readers. I say this every week, another reading vlog. I work full time, but in my free time, which I do have some, I'm reading about 2 books in a week, and I'm always trying to find fun and curious ways to get books off my TBR. So books I still want to read, but sometimes you put a book on your TBR, digital TBR. I really don't keep a physical TBR. That's too much money and I don't have enough space for that. Sometimes you put books on that TBR, because I know I'm not the only one, that you want to read, but really you just never get around to reading. Whether it's because you're reading all the newest books coming out, or you're reading books in a particular series, your friends are reading different books and you want to be reading the books they're reading. You know, there's always a reason. So I like to do fun little videos like this where I get those books off my TBR. But for this week, we're doing the oldest book on there based off the year it was published, and the newest book on there based off the year it was published. So it's a little bit of best of both worlds. We get a newly released book, or at least released in the last few weeks, because I tend to keep up with what's being released, what's popular, and want to read it, as well as a book that was released, which I already know, years ago. So I might not have ever gotten around to it based off of what's new and fresh. I did this video concept already before. I did it about 5 months ago, so it's been a few months back, and I thought, let's do it again. I had a really good time with both of those books. I believe one was a 4-star and one was a 4 or 5-star. Nonetheless, a really good week of reading. To do this, I actually am tracking my digital TBR on Goodreads, because Goodreads has a function when you go to your want to read list. Most of the time, your TBR is sorted by the date you added that book to your TBR, likely. But at the top, you can click sorted by and filter it by publication year. And the first book on there is usually the oldest. So we're gonna actually start out with the newest for this week, and let's scroll and see what that is. And then one other thing to note, when you're trying to find the newest book, it is often going to put books that haven't been published yet. Like the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books haven't come out yet. All right, so when we get rid of the books that haven't been published yet, we have our newest book that we're gonna start today, and that is Yesteryear by Carol Claire Burke. Okay. It is now Tuesday. I'm on my lunch break and I have started the first book of the week. And that book is none other than Yesteryear by Carol Claire Burke. And if this cover looks familiar, it's probably because it's everywhere. I am seeing everyone read this book. I feel like it came out around the same time that Into the Blue by Emma Brody came out. This book came out on April 7th of this year, 2026. I'm pretty sure that's when Into the Blue came out. And I think that Into the Blue had its run and now Yesteryear is having its run, or maybe I'm just a few weeks behind on it. This is the most recent book that was published on my TBR, and I really wanted to read it. Honestly, it kind of sparked the idea to do this video again because I knew it was one of the most recent ones, and I thought, what better way to get it off my TBR than to do a video like this and not feel guilty that I'm reading a newer release. This is also a debut novel by the author Carol Claire Burke. First off, the cover, I don't know, something just scratches my brain. I feel like there is a different rendition, maybe outside of the United States, of this cover that I liked as well. I don't know, the colors, the vibe, I'm here. It looks like Yesteryear is her first novel, and a little bit about them. They received their master's in fine arts from Bennington Writing Seminars, co-host of Diabolical Lies, a politics and culture podcast. So wow is all I have to say for for this being their first book ever. Absolutely wow. Let's dive into Yesteryear. This genre is fiction, of course, but I think that there's also a little bit of historical fiction in there, and you'll see why, and certainly some satire in here. Now, the name Yesteryear, I have recently heard this pop up because of this book, but it's also just a word that's used commonly. Well, not commonly for me. I'd never heard someone use yesteryear in a sentence, just in dialogue between people I know, but I have heard it on the internet more recently coming up. I think that yesteryear just means, like, I'll tell you what the internet says. A literary or poetic noun that refers to the recent past, the previous year, or former times. It's frequently used nostalgically to evoke a sense of bygone era or a time when attitudes and life were different. For this book, I knew it was going to be popular. It's not on Kindle Unlimited or anything like that, so I tried to put in a hold on the eLibrary Libby. It said several months of a wait, and then I tried to get it from my local library, the physical copy. This has really never happened to me when I tried to get a physical copy. I also placed it on a hold, and I was like 21 in line for the physical copy, so I knew I wasn't going to get it in time from the library either, which meant I did have to spend my hard-earned money to purchase this book, and it came as a hardback. It's about 391 pages, so just under 400 pages. Honestly, a perfect length. In this story, we are following Natalie, and Natalie is what they are calling a trad wife, a traditional wife. She lives pretty much in this deserted town on a farm, and she is partaking in what you would think as a traditional lifestyle, where you are making your own bread, homemade meals, also something someone might call she's a homemaker. Alongside of this traditional life, she is living on this farm with her 5 children, one on the way as well, so 6 coming up soon. She has a following on the internet. She is an influencer. She is being harshly critiqued by millions of people on the internet. If you live an influencer life, you take in content, you watch content, anything of the nature, you're gonna find some interest in this story. Part of her following are who she calls the angry women, and these are women who are basically leaving comments on all of her videos and her posts. They see Natalie as anti-feminist, and they let her know. Natalie is basically building her own empire on the internet and at her farm with her children and her husband, who her husband is also a part of this wealthy dynasty of a family with millions of dollars and basically can do whatever he wants in life. And so Natalie is perfectly curating her experience in life, what her followers see, what her children see of her, until one day she wakes up, she's in the 1800s. So we go from present to yesteryear. I think it's like 1855. She has no clue how she got there. She suspects that maybe she's on a TV show where they're pranking her basically and put her in this TV set. She doesn't know if she's actually transported back in time to the 1800s, and neither do I. So part of this timeline is the beginning, where we get to see her in the present day on the farm building her social media impact, and then bam, 1800s. But we're really not going back to the 1800 timeline, or not back. We're not going into the 1800 timeline to know how she got there, why she's there, why she has her children in this timeline, but they kind of look like her children but don't. Her husband kind of looks like her husband, but he doesn't. Her house is exactly like her house, but in the 1800s, no electricity, things of that nature. We're kind of skipping past that and going back into her college timeline, or her timeline when she first had her kid, and learning more about Natalie and what fuels Natalie, and less about, hey, there's a problem, we just got transported to the 1800s. And so we're just gonna keep trucking to see why Natalie's there and what Natalie's gonna do about it, if she can do anything about it at all. We're on chapter 23, which means in the last less than 24 hours, I've read 158 pages. I'm gonna update you once I finish yesteryear. Oh, did I just finish yesteryear, or did yesteryear just finish me? Like, what the actual heck did I just read? I just finished this at the beginning of my lunch break, and then I took a few minutes, went and ate my lunch, and we're back. Yesteryear by Carol Claire Burke. I'm gonna put this book down. That's what I'm gonna do. Let's just start with, this book is so bingeable. I finished it in under 2 days, and with it being so bingeable, I just can't believe that this is this author's debut novel, and I would say so viral in the bookish world right now. I see it everywhere. I myself picked it up, put it on my TBR. Maybe you will too. Maybe you've already read it. So I can't imagine what this author would write next if they're gonna keep writing books. I mean, come on. For, I would say 80% of this book, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was happening to Natalie. I was picking it up so I could figure it out, where we just dropped in the 1800s. What is this world? What kind of plot are we building? I have no clue. And usually when I'm so curious and have no idea what's going on, especially in a world where we have this trad wife who does social media and is suddenly in the 1800s when their current day is like America now, I am more critical. I didn't find myself being critical of this story at all. I was just like, okay, let me read next. What's gonna happen? So that is something to attest to what the author's doing here with their writing and just the story they built in yesteryear. The title goes on to mean so much more than you could imagine. Oh my god, I'm literally speechless. I just don't even know. It did touch on some hard topics though. I would say that if you are someone who wants to know about trigger warnings before going into a book, this is gonna be one of those. We talk about things like postpartum depression, religion, policies, and politics are interweaved in the lifestyle of these characters. You break down that traditional lifestyle, what it means to be a trad wife, a homemaker, a feminist, and some of these topics are not easy to read, so definitely look up warnings if you would like to prior to going into this book. And then with those heavy topics and exploration through our main character, Natalie, I think that the book is certainly satirical. That might be offensive to someone. Some of the things that they talk about, how they reference them with Natalie, how she references women, the whole thing could be very offensive. I did not take offense to it. I was just so wrapped up in the storytelling. I'm really glad I got this book off my TBR. I'm really glad I read this book. Honestly, it probably falls somewhere between a 4 and a 5 star, just for the simple fact of how engaging it was and really just being a page turner. I have not read a book like this ever. And that's where we'll finish off with Yesteryear. I think it's worth giving it a read if any of what I just talked about sounds interesting to you. And with that, I am going to pick up the oldest book on my TBR and start reading that now, or this afternoon, this evening, maybe pick it up tomorrow. And that's going to be Fly Away by Kristen Hanna. We have made it to Friday. I'm super excited for this update. I am on my lunch break and I have started the oldest book on my TBR based off publication date. This book came out in 2013. It's 2026, so my math tells me that was 13 years ago. Whew, that is a long time, especially for most of the books on my TBR. I went to Goodreads, filtered it by publication date, and the first book on there is a book by none other than Kristen Hanna. Now, I in particular wanted to do this challenge for this exact reason. This is a book that was sitting on my TBR for at least half a year now, almost half a year now, because I put it on there after reading the first book in this interconnected series. Because of the last time I did this challenge, I read the first book. This is all being vague, I'm not saying what these books are. And I thought if I never did this challenge again, it's likely that this book would be on my TBR, my digital TBR at least, for a very long time. I might never would have picked it up. I kept it on there nonetheless because I knew I would do this video again, and here we are a half a year later. This will be my fourth book by Kristen Hanna. The first book I read by Kristen Hanna was The Nightingale. I gave that 6 stars in my head, 5 star on paper. An incredible book, historical fiction, women's fiction. I read that book and I knew immediately that I had to keep reading other books by Kristen Hanna. I feel like that's one that she's more popular for. It's going to be a movie in the next few years with the Fanning sisters. I am so glad I read it and I cannot wait to watch that movie. I think so far of all the books I've read by Kristen Hanna, that is certainly the one I would recommend the most. After that book, I read this book, Firefly Lane, which is the first book in this interconnected series that we are picking back up this week. Firefly Lane, I also gave a 5 stars. We'll get into this book a little bit later. And then the third book I read was called The Women by Kristen Hanna. I think I gave it a 4 stars, something along those lines. So if you haven't read a Kristen Hanna book, or you have read one that's not the 3 I've mentioned today, let me know which one you've read and if you'd recommend it it or not. I certainly have recommended this author to other people, especially if you want to read more historical fiction tied into women's fiction. So now let's get back into Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna. We have to talk about this book because we wouldn't have this week's reading without this book. I did purchase this book. I purchased The Nightingale too. I'm glad to have both of those on my shelves, but I did not purchase The Women. I think that was on Kindle Unlimited, or I got it off Libby, I believe. And I did not purchase this week's book either. Firefly Lane, as you can see from this book, is also a TV series. So this author's books are certainly being adapted, which can tell you how popular they are and how meaningful they can be. Now, Firefly Lane tells a story of friendship. That is the biggest thing about this novel, is that we follow Tully and Kate, Kate and Tully. You say them together because they are always together. The book follows them from their first meeting as small teenagers all the way up until their adulthood. We go through everything with Kate and Tully, and Kate and Tully go through everything together. We follow them through high school, college, getting their first careers, raising families, having serious relationships with other people, and even a conflict that drove them apart and how they find themselves coming back together. A beautiful, beautiful story of friendship, but also a very complicated story of friendship. Emotional, sad, devastating, happy, all of the feelings, and I think that is certainly indicative of all the books I've read by this author so far. And something happens in this book, Firefly Lane, that I can't talk about without basically spoiling this book, and without talking about that, I really can't tell you what's happening in the second book, and that is Fly Away. I kind of can't even tell you who this book follows, but that it follows 3 characters in particular that were in Firefly Lane. It's just a big spoiler to tell you who's in this book, who's not in this book, things of that nature. Fly Away came out in 2013 following Firefly Lane. It is technically, I think, a standalone book, but really it makes so much more sense to read Firefly Lane first. Otherwise, you'd be lost in the sauce. I got this copy of the book from the library. I tried to get the eLibby version. It was not available for months. It's not on Kindle Unlimited or anything like that. So when it said it was available at my local library, I placed a hold, went to the library last weekend, and picked it up. And since this book is 13 years old, this might be the worst condition library book I've gotten. It's just seen many a lives, touched many of people, and many people have touched it. I accidentally got the large print version. I don't know how I managed. I had no clue I did that. And that has been throwing me off. The paper also feels like a Bible paper. It's just been a weird experience. You can see all the times people ate food and picked up the library book. While I'm a big advocate of library books, I'm also a little bit grossed out by this one. It also falls under women's fiction, and with the large print, it's 551 pages. I don't know how many pages that is in a regular size book. I have made it a good chunk of the way through this. We're on page 284, which is more than halfway through this book. Or is it? Yeah, math. We've got a little bit of the ways left to go, and we're gonna finish this book, and I'll give you an update on how I'm feeling about it and whether or not it being published 13 years ago even makes any difference. It is Saturday morning and I have officially finished Fly Away by Kristen Hanna. I read a good bit last night. I read a ton this morning, but I also leaned on Spotify premium hours in listening to some of it while doing some errands and chores around the house yesterday. And thank goodness, because oh my goodness, this book. I have finished it, so now I'm going to drop it off at the library. That way I can pass it along to whoever wants this large print old book. This will probably be my least favorite Kristen Hanna book. However, least favorite does not mean bad, does not mean I didn't enjoy it. It just means that of the 4 I've read, this one would fall in the 4th place. Really, I can't say much because it all spoils Firefly Lane. However, what I can say is that this book follows really 3 different people, or almost 4 different people that we actually saw their stories in Firefly Lane. The perspective of them, some of them, in my opinion, completely flip. You feel feel one way or are made to feel one way about these characters, and then you learn their story, you learn their background in this book, which is surprising because you thought you knew everything you needed to know in that other. You're like, wait, this is a totally different person. This is a totally different story, a totally different dynamic. This book was 95% sad. That's all I'll say. There really is no light at the end of the tunnel except for the last 5% of the book. It is full of grief. It is full of heaviness. It is full of trigger warnings. It is full of emotional sadness. And that's the best way I can explain it. I do think it's worth the time if you read Firefly Lane and really enjoyed it like I did. I gave that a 5-star. I would be remiss to not pick this one up and finish out the stories of all of these characters that you grow to love in that first book. I am really glad that I did a challenge again. I'm never mad that I do a challenge. I'm never mad that I'm reading. And now that we've read the newest and oldest book on my TBR, there is now a newer book and a new older book on my TBR. Let me know if you liked this idea and this type of challenge, or if there's any others like this that can find fun ways to get these books off my list and read them and enjoy them and stay curious. That's all. Bye for now.